Hello, welcome to our next video. I thought what I would do with today's video is I would walk through a solution to this credit card processor lab just because it was a little bit different. So probably with the explanation this will likely end up being about a half an hour worth of time. So let's just get through this. Okay, so first of all, I know it started off very tersely as like add a logout functionality, which kind of suggested like, hey, maybe everything is going to work in the first place. Unfortunately, not quite, because even doing something like this, just from the initial source code that was downloaded, you see it doesn't do anything at all. But I'm hoping, well, I mean, everybody managed to get through this much. You immediately saying, hey, this thing called attempt login is not defined. And yes, I left that in. I actually did manage to get one question. It was somebody asking, is this supposed to work? And the answer was, well, yeah, it was supposed to work, but I purposely left things out. Okay, so obviously the problem here is that we're trying to call this attempt login. You'll realize that there's absolutely no JavaScript files included. So that's obviously up our first thing. So let's include the JavaScript file for the cms.js. Okay. All right, so back over to here, and hopefully now we get some, at least, okay, so that's good. We get an invalid username and password, 0501, 00501, I think is the name of somebody. Okay, and let's put in the magic password of 12class34. Okay, and of course we start off with absolutely nothing. All right, and that's because, well, nothing happened to work from the first place. So one of your first things that you would have had to do was probably to get into the JavaScript file and actually start processing this. And of course, if you dig through here, you can see the attempt login. We're pulling up the authenticate, and whether or not it's true or false, then we go, if it happens to be true, then we come in here and we say show the customer detail. I'm pretty sure we actually did something pretty similar to this in the previous video, so hopefully you already had an answer to it, and it was just a matter of getting it copied in place. In any case, you can see here that I've got this thing called edit fname, edit last name, current expiry. These happen to be a bunch of things in here called CID. Okay, well, let's start off with actually printing out some information about the CID. So here, let's print out CID. We'll reload 0001112 class 34. Oh, and if you're looking for really clever ways of doing things, you can always set the values to these. A couple of people did this, thank you. That saved me from typing it in. Okay, and you can see that it's printing out this number, but of course that's not the number I'm interested in. I'm interested in like the first name and last name and current expiry. Okay, but of course we already know that we've got this big long thing called a customer list. And that customer list has a bunch of information. Okay, so, well, let's go off and actually find that particular customer. So first of all, you'll see that it is a map. It is not an array, so that means that we probably want to use, oh, well, guess what? It looks exactly like this. So, in fact, let's just steal exactly the same thing. So we'll steal this and print this out. And, just to even get started, let's just do a console.log.c and find out whether or not we've got the right thing. So again, 00501, 12 class 34. And customer list of undefined, this customer list. Oh, well, this is because now this is no longer a class function. This is actually something out here. Oh, but look at this. I do have this thing called get customer, so maybe that's actually what I need to call. So I do have a variable called CMS. You would have seen this down here. So it's a global variable called CMS. So let's just go ahead and call it. Okay, here we go, and print this value out. Okay, once again, reload. 00151 and 12 class 34. Okay, good. So now we've got the actual information. So you have the first name, the last name, the password, and the past expiry, as well as the CID. Okay, so let's go back and actually make some use of this. Okay, now at this point here, I didn't care whether or not you chained a couple of these things together. For example, get element by ID. We know that there's something back here called edit fname. So edit fname. And if you want to just go ahead and set the value equal to c dot first name, that would have been perfectly fine by me. No reason to have a second variable in here because we're only going to use it the one time. So edit lname, value c dot lname, last name. Okay, here we go, and let's give it a try. Okay, so at least we got the first name and last name, so the only thing left is the current expiry. And of course, the current expiry happens to be a span, so you can't use a dot value. You have to use the inner text or inner HTML. Okay, so document get element by ID. Okay, the name of that element is current expiry. Okay, and let's set it up to inner HTML. Now I'm going to be back in 1 second. Now this one happens to be, sorry, I have to go back here and remind myself what the, oh no, I can't remember what I called it. Pass expiry. Pass expiry. Okay, let's take a look and see if we got the right thing. There's a 501 and 1, 2, class 3, 4. Okay, so this happens to be the initial set of data. Now, something that you may have questioned about, or maybe you've seen me do a couple of times, let me try writing this a slightly different way. Create element, or sorry, get element by ID, current expiry, inner text C pass expiry. Okay, let's take a look at this one. What does this one happen to look like? And what's the difference? Okay, so this apparently does exactly the same thing. So is this one of these cases where we can just use either inner HTML or inner text completely interchangeably? And what's the difference between the two? Okay, so a couple of small things about it. So obviously they are slightly different because if they were exactly the same thing, then they would be called exactly the same thing. All right, so the inner HTML allows you to set HTML, and inner text allows you to set only, well, guess what, text. Okay, so what's the big deal? Okay, if you wanted to include, like, say, a bold tag, because you wanted to make this thing bold, /B, okay, will this end up working here? Well, let's take a look and see whether or not we've actually got this to be bold. So 0501, 2, class 3, 4. Okay, you'll see what happens here is it's actually put in the tags, the actual tags directly. So it's not actually showing up as bold. However, if we were to come back to our previous one and uncomment this, and let's include the bold value this time. Okay, now of course it's actually going to say c.expiry because it is actually a hard-coded string. Okay, but you'll notice this time it actually does appear that it is bold. Okay, so the difference between inner HTML, you are allowed to pass in HTML tags, including other things inside. When you're dealing with text, anything that you type in will end up being just used directly. Okay, so why would you pick one versus the other? Because obviously you could have just used the inner HTML all the time rather than inner text. Okay, well the difference is inner HTML tends to be a little bit slower, only because it has to go through and it has to look for all the tags and do the right things. So an inner text ends up being quite a bit quicker. Not something we have to worry about in this course, but usually if you're only setting text values and you're not actually putting in tags, it's actually probably a better idea to use inner text rather than inner HTML. Okay, so back into here, we'll just make sure that everything is fine and we'll carry on with the next part. Okay, so good. This is what we've got so far. All right, now, a couple of things. First of all, this logout button, I would really like it to be able to do something. Okay, well, let's go back and take a look. Do we have a logout button? We have, and it says right now, logout current user. And if you look down here, it says that there's a logout current user, happens to do absolutely nothing. So what is it that we need to do? Okay, well, there's a couple of things that we're going to need to be able to do. So first of all, let me just swipe this type of thing because I'm going to do some things here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the customer screen and I'm going to make this equal to none. And I'm going to make the login screen being equal to not black, block. Okay, and let's clear everything out here. All right, and then let's see if we got the right thing. 0, 0, 1, 1, 2, class 3, 4 again. Okay, here we go, and here's a logout button. Now we're back. Now you'll notice something about this. I didn't take any marks, but if you didn't do this, could you please go back and fix it? Because right now, you take a look at this. You see the username and the password are still set. So imagine this. You're logged in, you're doing a bunch of work, and you log out, and now you walk away. Well, guess what? The next person who comes behind you doesn't do anything. They just hit login, and now they're back in again. So it's probably a good idea that as soon as you do manage to get logged in fact, I would probably do this up in this section. I would immediately go to the document, get the element by ID, and I would take at least the password, and I would set the password's value back to an empty string. Now, if you want to, you can certainly make the other one, the username, empty as well. But at least now we've got the following effect. So when we log out, at least the password is gone. The username is still here in case you want to retain. So we'll leave that as a convenience factor, but you could also clear both of them. Okay, the next part, setting up to do the modification of these things. Yeah, this was pretty much done by everybody, so there's no big deal with this one. Okay, so this one here says update customer details. So what do we need to do? Well, updating the customer details, well, there's a couple of things that you're going to need. You're going to need, well, both of these values. So let me hijack a little bit of this. So we'll call this FN for the first name. And of course, we're not going to put it this way. We're going to say, give me the value, and we'll let LN be the last name, and that will be the last name's value. Okay, now the only thing that we need to do. Okay, the thing is, we need to know which one of these things has to be modified. Okay, because we know that somebody was selected. So how do we know which one was actually selected? Okay, well, the secret here is when things got logged in, you'll notice here that there's a variable called current customer, and current customer was a global variable. So in other words, that's going to survive its values between function calls, which means that down here I still have something called current customer. Okay, and the current customer, of course, is just the ID number. So let's have C being equal to, we'll have cust is equal to, well, let's go to the CMS and ask for the current customer. So ask for the current customer. And of course, once we have this, then we could say things like the first name is equal to FN. You could say custod last name is equal to LN. Well, what about if these things were protected variables? Let's see, do we have anything? Well, since these things are public, it means that we can go ahead and we can modify them directly. Now, really what I should have done here is I shouldn't have allowed you to have direct access to these things. I really should have made these things private, and I should have given you some functions in here to be able to modify things. And a couple of people did things like this, and that's completely fine. Okay, but this time, let's just go ahead and just modify this directly. So that'll be the updating of the customer. Now, let me run this one and find out whether or not this works. Okay, and here's exactly how I ended up testing for yours. Okay, so I logged in and I said, okay, we'll just make some changes. I clicked on the save button. And do you notice something about this? Absolutely nothing is being made clear that I actually just clicked on the save button. I think I clicked on it, but I can't actually tell. It would be really useful if there was like a little message here saying, hey, I actually did something. So how can I find out whether or not it was really saved? Okay, number one, I could log out, log back in, and see whether or not this person is here. But this is actually one of my quick little tricks. I'll just come down to the console, I'll type CMS, and we'll take a look at the actual customer that was down here, and you can see that this person's name is actually changed. Okay, so that's the way how I ended up checking. But really, having a message here would be really beneficial. And if you didn't do that, could you please go in and actually fix that? And if you've noticed, I had this little thing down here called the information message. It was a span. So let's come in here and let's say document dot get element by ID information message, and let's actually set it to something. So let's set its inner. Oh, now we're going to include tags. If we're not, then use this one and just say let's say customer updated. Okay, again, it isn't that it absolutely has to be here, but it certainly makes life considerably better, so that at least you know that something has happened. Okay, so please, whenever you're writing code for this course or any other course, when you do something by clicking on a button, make sure that it's obvious that something happened. Okay, so that was the first half. Now, the second half gets into some more interesting things, which of course is the actual credit card. Okay, so here's the way how I usually tested it is when I took your code, I typed a bunch of letters, I typed on extend expiry, and I watched to see whether or not I had mistakes down here or whether or not I had mistakes up here. All right, now a couple things about this. Okay, so this obviously has something to do with start payment. Okay, now I'm going to do something which is completely incorrect, but I'm going to do it because more than half of you ended up doing this. So please let me explain why. Now, I did tell you the way about how you go and create a credit card charge. And of course, what you need is you need to make one of these objects for a credit card processor. Okay, now I saw a whole lot of people do stuff like this. New credit card processor. Okay, some people left out the parentheses. I really recommend you put it in, even though I know you can get away without it, but please put them in. But of course, this isn't going to work unless I actually bring in the credit card processor before, so I need yet another script. So src and cc processor.js. Okay, so that's now included. Let's find out whether or not this is working. Sorry, back to here and reload the page. Once again, log in to class 3.4. You know what? I think I am tired of this, so let's be a little bit lazy. Username, let's set the value equal to 00501. Let's set the password equal to the value 12 class 3.4. That'll save me typing in that number each time. Okay, come over to here and, well, let me type in something and click on extend expiry. Okay, now you notice that nothing has happened because of course I haven't done anything yet, and what it does say is processor count is equal to 0. But now take a look at this. If I click on extend expiry again, it says, hey, you can only create one credit card processor object. What gives about this? Okay, what I did inside my credit card processor is I left in here something to make sure that you did not create more than one of these. Okay, because I don't want you doing this. Why would you keep creating a credit card processor just so you can use it for one transaction and then throw it out? It doesn't work this way. In fact, if you create it inside start payment and you have another function that's being called, you actually won't have the credit card processor. This credit card processor needs to be a global variable and it needs to be around for the entire time. You see, it's for the same reason why we created just one local customer management system at the beginning of the application. We don't create one when we show the customer. We don't create one when we update the status. We don't create one when we log out. We don't create one when we update the customer. We create one for the entire duration. Okay, so why don't we just create a whole bunch of them? Well, because this is actually very wasteful of CPU process because there's no reason to create more than one. Create the one which may set up a communication link to a bank and then just leave it. Keep using it. So in other words, don't make this as a local variable. Okay, this does not belong as a local variable. But you'll see up here, I do have this variable called bank, and that's actually where I wanted you to store this. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to create one of these credit card processors down here, and I'm not going to use it up here inside the start payment. Okay, all right, so next up. Okay, first thing that we need to do is we need to be able to create one of those charge objects. So that was my description from before. So let's go take a look at what a charge object is. So creating a charge, you have to first of all create the charge object. So there's up here, we have a charge object which has two parameters in the constructor, which is the amount and the number. Okay, and then it seals up the object so you can't add any extra things. I put lots of traps in here to make sure you're really doing the right thing. All right, so first of all, let's have this thing called a charge. This one will happen every time that you start a payment. So Let's create a charge object. And what do you need? Well, you need two things. You need the amount, and if you remember, the exercise says that there's always 40 QR. Okay, the second thing is the actual credit card number. Okay, so where do we get the credit card number for? CC num. Well, if you remember, that is probably inside this place right here called CC number. Okay, so CC number. Okay, and I'll describe the value. Okay, so this is going to be the actual credit card number. CC num. All right, so now what do we do with this charge? Well, you take it and you give it to the bank. So you say bank create charge, and you hand in charge. All right, now there's obviously other things we need to do, but you know what? I'm going to start with this one because I've got one thing that I want to demonstrate first. So let's first of all log in. That saves me a lot of time. Let me type a bunch of random stuff, which is no good. If I now attempt to click on extend expiry, you'll notice that the supplied credit card number did not pass the check digit test. Okay, what gives about this? And that looks like a very forceful error, by the way. In fact, it says on caught, and of course, I hope you know what the word on caught means. It's referring to an exception. So if we take a look at okay, apparently somebody is here. Okay, sorry, I guess I'll stop this video and reassemble everything else later. I'm back. All right, continuing on. Now I gotta remember where I left this off. Okay, so back here, when you take a look at this create charge, you'll notice that there's actually a couple of things going on here in terms of exceptions, and really you should be dealing with both of these things. But in any case, you'll see that if you give me something that wasn't a charge object, I immediately complained and said, hey, I expected a charge object, and instead you gave me one of these things. But this is the most obvious one, which is the supplied credit card number is just completely incorrect. Okay, so that's going to be our first thing. So of course, how do you deal with exceptions? Well, you need to try and catch. And no, the answer isn't that you come in here and you start modifying create charge and put a try and catch, because I did make it very clear saying that for this exercise, do not modify anything in the CC processor file. You have to actually make use of this somewhere else. So putting a try in here and a catch in here, this is actually completely wrong, and if you're tempted to do this, it means that you don't understand the whole purpose of how these tries and catches work, because you don't need tries and catches. You could have just used an if statement and returned like an undefined or something. Okay, so that's definitely not the right thing, but in order to handle this correctly, what you need is back here, you know that you're about to create a charge. Okay, so, or we're going to create a charge, and this may throw an exception. So what I do is I wrap this inside a try, and I'll put inside here a catch. And all that I'm going to do is I'm just going to console.log e to find out what I actually get back. Okay, so hopefully at least we know that we've got some kind of an error. Okay, so, sorry, wrong file. So go back to here, load this up, let's log in, let's type a bunch of random stuff and click on here, and at least now we no longer have the crash. This is actually just a regular console.log message. Okay, this is just a regular console.log message, and of course probably what we're interested in is that message right here, the credit card number did not pass the check digit test. Now where did that come from? Well, that ended up coming from if we go back here, that was a second parameter to this thing called CC processing error. All right, let's go up and take a look. CC processing error has a message. So every error has something called .message. Okay, so let's make use of this. So back here, if we're interested in actually making this appear on the screen, what we could do is we could use this information message right here. In fact, oh, look at this. I've got this function already called update status message. Well, that'll be better than me actually doing that. In fact, I shouldn't have done that right here. All that we're going to do is we're going to take this and be interested in e.message. Okay, now, no matter what type of error it is, that should update the status. So let's find out if this is okay. So here's a bunch of stuff, and perfect, it did not pass this. Okay, so everything will end up failing with the exception of actual valid credit card numbers. Okay, so now I think over here I've got some some stuff that I've hung on to already. So this happens to be a valid number, but it's an invalid account. So in other words, the account doesn't exist, but it doesn't fail. And of course, at least I don't get the message. Okay, so now, how do we make use of this thing? Okay, now that we've created this charge, there's a couple things that need to happen. Okay, first of all, when this comes back, you get back something called a charge ID, and you have to hang on to the charge ID. Called CID for charge, or CHID for charge ID. And what we need to do is we need to keep checking this because banks tend to be a little bit slow. It takes a bit of time. I mean, it's not like an instantaneous thing. And what you want to do is you at least want to have some kind of processing type message going on. Okay, now, if you take a look up here, I did have this thing called a pending charge. Maybe that's the one that I was talking about. So let's have this thing called pending charge will be equal to creating the charge. All right, and of course, if there's any error, well, we'll just immediately stop it and we'll jump out. Now, if there is no problem, what do we need to do? Well, we know that we need to keep checking back over and over again. So I thought what I would do is I would have an extra function over here, and I'll call check complete to find out whether or not the transaction is currently complete. All right, and here's what we're going to do. Let's create an interval timer. Okay, and let's have a function, and the function we'll call check complete. Okay, and maybe we'll do this every 1 second, or if you want, you could even do it every half a second. Okay, so check complete. So here's what we're going to do is let's just do a console.log, checking to see if we are done. Okay, but that's all we're going to do right now. Okay, so let's log in this way. Oh, sorry, did I end up missing something? Sorry, I removed too many things back here. Okay, here we go. All right, let's log in. Let's try an actual valid number. Okay, and of course checking to see if we're done, checking to see if we're done. So at least we know that our timer is started. So now what I need to do is I just need to get in to actually pick up this information. Okay, so check complete. Okay, now you notice in my little demo, you could see like ... appearing. So here's actually what I'm going to do. I have this variable up here called a waiting message, and here's what we're going to do. So waiting message. So before I start calling, I'm going to say that the waiting message is waiting for bank to reply. Okay, and I'm not going to have any dots. Okay, but I'll leave a space. But what I'm going to do in here is every time that I call this check complete, I'm going to take the thing called waiting message and I'm going to add a single dot to the end of it. And, well, all I'm going to do is I'm going to say update status message, and we will say the waiting message. Okay. In fact, you know what? Let's do this up here as well. So as soon as we send it, update status message, waiting message. Okay. So now what this will end up giving me is the following effect. So let's paste in this number. Okay, and you can see that this is just getting longer and longer and longer. So at least it kind of gives a bit of a distraction so that the person doesn't know or doesn't think that the entire system is hung. So at least if you can show something, maybe a spinning icon would be fine, but at least it's doing something. Okay, so now let's actually see if we can do something a little bit more useful. Okay, so rather than just updating this message, what I want to do is I want to go and I want to get the actual charge object. So let's say CH, I want to go to the bank and I want to get the charge. And I'm going to get the charge called pending charge. And what this will be the actual value. Okay, in fact, here, let me show you the CH so you can see what it looks like. Let's log in. Let's paste this out here. Okay, and you can see that it's pending was the first time, but then it said failed and it says invalid account. Well, of course, at this point here, I probably want this entire thing to stop. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Once we get this back, we have to start asking some questions. So remember that everything, or these charge objects have a status field. So if status is equal to failed, okay, well, that's obviously one problem. Okay, that was one state. Otherwise, if CH status is equal to succeeded, which I think is the other one. Okay, and finally, it's the other case. Okay, and the other case, all that I'm going to do is I'm simply going to update this waiting message so it spits out one more of these things. Okay, so we'll leave this one here in case I need it. But if it says failed, it means that I'm actually completely finished. So what I could do is I could go back to update status message, and let's set it equal to ch dot. Well, there's something here called failed reason. Failed reason. All right, you know what? I'm actually going to leave this one back in for a second. Okay, so here we go. Let's log in. Let's once again search for this one. And pending. Now you see it failed, and it has shown me the invalid account, but notice that this timer just keeps on going. Okay, well, what would be really useful, of course, is once I finally get back an answer, there's absolutely no reason why I can't cancel the timer. So it would be really useful if I could do a clear interval, but of course, what do I pass in here? Well, if you remember, normally what you end up passing in is the result that comes from set interval. Well, if you notice, I've also got this thing up here called a retry timer. Okay, so let's make use of the retry timer. So retry timer is set interval, and let's just clear the interval for the retry timer. Okay, so now if something ends up failing, okay, waiting for bank to reply, so you see that it did come back with an invalid account, and more importantly, this timer stops. So if I try it again, okay, eventually it also ends up stopping. So it took a couple of seconds this time. It only took 1 second at a time before. Okay, so that's sort of our first thing. That looks after an invalid account. I've got an insufficient amount of money here in this account, so let's try this one. Okay, see if we get a different message, waiting for bank, and it says insufficient funds, so that's perfect. That's exactly what we want. Okay, so now the only other thing is what happens if this ends up being succeeded. Okay, well, if this ends up being succeeded, then there's a few things that we need to do. All right, number one, we obviously want to put some kind of a message saying that, hey, the time or things have been updated. So the update status message will say expiry updated correctly, or updated. Okay, there's our first piece. All right, second thing that you need to do. Okay, now once we get this done, of course, we also need to update the actual customer. Okay, well, which customer? Well, we know that there's a customer, and the current customer is right here. So let me steal this line. Okay, so here we go. And now what you want to do is you just want to take the customer and you want to take the past expiry. Okay, and all that you want to do is you want to take today plus 15 days. Okay, how do you do that? Well, we did that already, and you already have the functions for it. So, just as a hard-coded demo, because I don't have a copy of it, I forgot to get a hold of it already, here, we'll extend it till the end of the year. Okay, so that'll be hard-coded to the end of the year. All right, so one final thing, let's log in, and let's try using the valid, well, that's not a valid credit card number, but let's come down here to, let's first of all start with some insufficient funds. Okay, paste this one in, and it says insufficient funds, so that's as expected. This one right here should have actually been okay. So let's come in here, paste it in, extend expiry, waiting, and of course the entry is being updated. Oh, it looks okay. A couple things. I forgot to cancel my timer. Okay, so let's cancel the timer. It's exactly the same thing. Cancel the timer. Oh, and of course the important thing is you would have to update all the customer details. Well, if you remember that there's already something here called show customer details, well, let's just use it. So show customer details, and we'll pass in current customer. Okay, even though it's kind of silly for this one. Okay, but here we go. Let's see whether or not, oh, again. Okay, back over to here. Let me grab this number and see whether or not we managed to get this updated. Okay, so you see, eventually my timer is stopped and my credit card, my current expiry is being updated. Okay, so the only thing that's different is you need that add days, current date and add days. You just steal it from the other thing, you paste it in as an extra function, and you use it. That's the only thing that's missing. Okay, so now, is this close to reality? It's getting actually pretty close. Now, in reality, in reality, you know that there's something else missing here. Normally, these credit cards would have not only a number and an available balance, but they would probably also have things like people's names attached to them, as well as expiry dates and the magic 3-digit code in the back of the card. So those things should probably be added to this, but I decided to keep this as simple as possible. Okay, so that's kind of a very quick overview about how this ends up working. I did end up with a couple of questions during the test, and I said just kind of ignore this for right now. And this is actually going to be the concept of the next video, which is this thing called static. Okay, and that's actually some of the stuff that ended up keeping you from making more than one object. But this problem here about people making the new object over and over again. Sorry, not one of those, but making this credit card processor over and over again. That one is really quite critical. Please don't do that. Okay, you create objects and you hang on to them for the duration that you need them. You don't just make them and throw them away at the end of a function. Especially things that have like a lot of static data in them that stick around for the duration of the program. Again, that's why this shows up here once and it doesn't just show up inside a function and then get thrown away. Okay, so I did leave that one in, and I also tried to set it up so that you couldn't make more than one of those objects. I wanted you to really think about that one. Okay, so that's the end of this video. I'm now going to go off and we're going to build up some review videos of some other stuff, including that word right up there that I showed you a minute ago called static. Okay, see ya.